Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Lauren Feldman with Forbes. We're here to talk about the future of work and what's coming with artificial intelligence. Since I know less about this than anybody else on the stage, I'm going to lead the conversation. And I'm going to start by asking each of my panelists to introduce themselves, tell us what you do, and tell us how nervous should we be about the arrival of artificial intelligence and what that's going to do to the future of work.
Okay, so I'm Mark Becker. I'm the president of Georgia State University right here in downtown Atlanta. I have over 50,000 students. Thank you. A few alums in the room or students.
How did you do that?
It's a home team fans. So I think the answer to your question in a true academic answer is it depends. You should either be nervous to the extreme or supremely excited about what the future of work is. My assumption is that anything can be routinized will. We saw that first with manufacturing production lines and then the advent of robots. Well, other things are coming, and you'll hear examples from many of us up here, whether it's autonomous vehicles or whether it's going to be having intelligent systems reading your x-rays instead of a radiologist. So the future of work is disrupted. But on the exciting side, about 2/3 of the students in high school today believe that they are going to work for themselves as opposed to work for an employer per se. And what that tells me is that they're actually thinking about what is the future of work. The future of work is you as an individual in the workforce are going to have to think about what is your value? What value do you add? If your value is that you can do a mundane activity over and over again, whether it's working on a production line, driving a vehicle, or reading x-rays, you're toast. But on the other hand, if you take very seriously what your value is, whether it's your ability in a customer-facing environment to provide supreme service, or whether it's some technological skills that you have, or the ability to take technological skills and add value to an organization, your future is extremely bright. So it depends. The greatest risk, the greatest nervousness is the threats to income inequality. We already have too great income inequality in this country. And if this goes badly, it's going to get worse. If we handle it well, we all benefit.
When you say some people are toast, is it time to start thinking about that?
It's well past time to be thinking about that. I think in the November 2016 election, you saw the results of that. A highly dissatisfied electorate that feels that they've been left behind by the workforce, by the economy. And so I think we're well behind thinking about that and having policy change that's going to help us as a nation, whether it's be it the rural or urban areas, deal with the real issues of the nature of work, the nature of employment is changing dramatically.
Nancy?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nancy Harris. I'm the Managing Director of Sage North America. Sage develops software that serves small and medium businesses for accounting, payments, payroll, and human capital management. So I come from the software development world. And in terms of should we be nervous, I would say moderately nervous. And why I qualify that is much like Mark's remarks, in that there's a lot of positive that can come from artificial intelligence and from where we're heading. We surveyed and did a productivity tracker, and if you think about this stat, as of noon today, tracking from January 1st of this year, $77.6 billion in workers in small and medium businesses spending their time on administrative and mundane routinized work. And if you think about that and what can happen in terms of artificial intelligence and automation, we can take that routinized work away from people and elevate what they do to be much more strategic, much more advisory, and much more rewarded financially. The however and the but is that what does that do to our workforce in terms of loss of jobs for people who perform those duties day in and day out? And so we have to think about that, and how do we train the future workforce to be flexible in how they think and how they learn so that they can move from that type of work to another level of work. And that's where I say eyes wide open. We need to start now. We're behind, quite frankly. We need to educate. We need to ensure that we provide education so that we make these technologies accessible to all, both large corporations, small businesses, and to individuals in terms of what their skill set is. And one of the things that we often think about is that we also have to be very thoughtful, not only about accessibility, but about ethics. And so what you'll hear from some of the panelists today is when you think about artificial intelligence, the other somewhat nerve-wracking or scary part can be, how are we training artificial intelligence? Is there a bias in the data sets that we're using to train AI? And is it perpetuating unconscious bias that we have in our society? So lots of food for thought, but there has to be, I view it as there's a balance to this nervousness, and there's some positives and some drawbacks.
This isn't just a theoretical conversation for you. You guys are already doing this at Sage
That's
today.
right, that's right. We have already developed chatbots as an example where you can actually speak to the chatbot. The chatbot, you could say, upload this expense to my general ledger. It will upload the expense into your accounting product, and away you go. So we spend a lot of time internally within our labs having conversations about things like the ethics of AI and how do we do this the right way.
We use chatbots to help onboard students from high school into college. So chatbots are just about everywhere now.
Yeah.
Harry?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harry Wilson. I'm the founder and CEO of the Mava Group. It's a turnaround merchant bank where we work with companies that are in trouble. And many of the companies we deal with are companies that are in trouble because of automation and the implications for their business models. And what you're seeing across the economy is the same wave of automation that has transformed industrial manufacturing, particularly heavy manufacturing, is now sweeping into more refined manufacturing and the services sector. You see the early signs of this in automated checkouts, or the 100,000 robots, literally 100,000 robots that work at Amazon today, or the push towards autonomous driving. But the key problem as we look forward from where we are today is as that trend accelerates, the job displacement will begin to exceed job creation. The best work I've seen on this topic is from my friend Karen Harris at Bain & Company. They think that by the year 2030, 20 to 25% of American jobs will disappear. Now, I'm not quite as dire as that. I think these things take longer. And I think that where we sit today, people can't foresee, fortunately, people can't foresee job creation that will take place as a result of the changes that take place in the economy over the next 15 to 20 years. But it's clear that massive dislocation is coming to the job categories that are most affected by it. And it's clear that I think it'll exacerbate income inequality, as Mark said, as you see the owners of automation and those who develop mechanisms to do this benefit and through the network effect, and those who are on the receiving end, unfortunately, are hurt by it. And I think that'll have some really profound public policy consequences over the next 15 to 20 years. The last thing I'll end out for the intro here is that as everybody has said, with great challenge comes great opportunity. And I think there are a couple things that are also clear. One is flexibility and adaptability will be critical going forward. It won't be, and that's just true for kids in high school today, but also true for all of us. And be able to kind of adapt and foresee and be able to plan for the future critical. And then secondly, I think government, under both political parties, is terrible at dealing with long-term challenges. And I think the last 20 years have proved that on both sides of the aisle. And so where the onus really falls is on entrepreneurs. Everybody in this room, everybody we know, whether you're a for-profit entrepreneur or a not-for-profit entrepreneur, and developing mechanisms, training, protocols, systems that allow people to transition and to manage this transition to a more automated economy. So that's the challenge and the opportunity.
Harry, again, this is not a theoretical conversation for you. You just said this is something you're dealing with right now. You specialize in helping companies that are being impacted by this today. Can you give us an example of that? What are people facing today?
Yeah, I'll give you a pro and a con. So I'm on two corporate boards. These are both public companies. Visteon, large, used to be a division of Ford, large auto parts supplier, and they are a leader in developing systems for autonomous driving. And so that's a huge business opportunity for them. This is a business that has, in terms of profitability, quintupled in the last 4 years and will continue to grow, we think, going forward. So it's an opportunity for them to really help drive the space. On the other side, I'm on the board of Sotheby's, the auction house. Now, there's an example of a business that should be highly human capital dependent. I can't tell you the difference between one Picasso and another. Maybe other people in this room can. The experts at Sotheby's absolutely can. And they can put really accurate prices on those. And you would think that's something that's really hard to automate. But one of the things we're wrestling with right now is how can you automate it and taking the same technology that you use for facial recognition, but using it for painting recognition, and be able to kind of further refine that, not immediately, but over time, to be able to provide that caliber of expertise on an automated basis. And so, of course, to design that, you need human capital. right, up front. You need the expertise up front. But once it's built in and continually refined, it can outpace the ability of humans and eliminate some of these bias issues that humans have over time. So it's both a threat and an opportunity for something like Sotheby's.
Dennis?
I'm Dennis Lockhart, the former president of the Atlanta Fed, and now I'm hustling to get work.
How's that going?
I'll make 3 points. One way to think about what is coming is a useful construct of a scholar at MIT, David Autor is his name, and he thinks in terms of a simple framework of cognitive and non-cognitive work. Cognitive meaning basically that it requires brain work more than brawn to do the work, and repetitive and non-repetitive. So non-cognitive, non-repetitive is your basic manual labor, day labor. There are a lot of jobs in this category, and actually that category of work is less imperiled by what's happening. The non-cognitive but repetitive has largely already been automated or is in the process of being automated. And people in that category clearly are fighting against a big trend. What is most interesting is cognitive repetitive. And it's already been said here. And that work is being automated at a fairly rapid pace. At the top end of that is the cognitive non-repetitive. Most of the people in the room do that kind of work. It requires that you problem solve every day. And those people are, to some extent, protected. However, I would say that the divisions between cognitive and non-cognitive, clearly machine work is encroaching upon human work. And in the future, it's going to be a little bit more clear that there is a category of machine work and a category of human work. So let me go to a second study that I found very interesting, a Harvard economist named David Deming. And he argues that the growth of jobs that require social work skills, teamwork, collaboration, communication skills, that category has been growing, while the pure STEM work with no social interaction requirement has actually been on the decline. So many of us grew up in the revenge of the nerds period. The true nerds' days may be numbered now. You're going to have social skills, call this human work, social skills like empathy, like the ability to read nuanced emotions and so forth, in order to thrive in the future. I'll make one final point, which is maybe a little bit pedantic, but it's certainly one of the ways I organize my own thinking, and that is I see a difference between work and jobs. I think there's plenty of work to do in our society. You can drive around any city, you can go through neighborhoods, you can look at all the things that need to be done, and that's work. A job is funded work. And Harry mentioned entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the people who translate work into jobs because they find a way to fund a particular quotient of work. And I think there will be a great premium on that in the future. But I don't see any lack of work. We have plenty of work to do. The issue will be jobs. And finally, I think this will come quickly, but still will be evolutionary, not revolutionary. The world is not going to turn the lights off on jobs overnight. And in all likelihood, job content will change in its mix. And the human side will become more emphasized, and the routine or repetitive aspect of jobs will be automated.
It's interesting. I think there's some cognitive dissonance on those very issues. I mean, right now, we're all expecting this this wave to hit. There are going to be lots of people looking for work. It's going to be terribly disruptive. But right now, I talk to business owners all the time who can't find enough employees. The job market, we know, is incredibly tight. When's it going to change? What's going to happen that's going to drive this home and make us realize that we're in a brave new world?
Well, one of the drivers is clearly going to be competition in various industries, so that people leading businesses will have no choice but to bring automation or robotics or artificial intelligence into the mainstream of how they do something in their particular company. And how quickly that happens is going to vary from industry to industry, I think. And I've seen discussions in writing of the difference between what you might call tangible and physical industries versus really true cognitive industries or service industries that depend more on human thinking than they depend upon moving things around or whatever. And whether artificial intelligence invades that whole segment of really physical industries is an interesting question. There's certainly indications that that's going to happen. Mines, for example, today operate with autonomous vehicles. That's a good example. But the techno-pessimists out there believe that it will be a long time before those industries have the degree of automation that service industries have.
Have you started doing anything differently at Georgia State to prepare students?
Well, certainly, you got to educate students for jobs that don't exist today. So your focus in education has to be on learning to learn, learning to teach yourself, learning to get re-educated, and a big emphasis on entrepreneurship. I mean, as I said, 2/3 of the students come in think they're going to work for themselves. Some are going to be an entrepreneur, and the definition of an entrepreneur is a person who creates thousands of jobs. Others are going to be small business people that hire literally dozens, maybe to a few hundred people. And some are going to be independent contractors. And so we're in this process of figuring out how do you prepare people for that world, and they're going to have to figure out where is their value in that space. Are they going to be an independent contractor as opposed to having a job for a particular entity, like a company? Or are they going to be a small business person, which is really the appetite of a lot of young people today? And a few are going to be entrepreneurs. They're going to create something from nothing and literally employ thousands of people, and it's going to make a big difference. So what students are looking for in terms of the degrees, the technology, we're seeing students in the humanities that want more analytical skills, more computational skills. So what students are studying and what we're preparing for them is changing. But the other piece I want to kick into this is we actually have an example of this change just from where I sit, and that is when I came into this business of higher education over 30 years ago, we had something called secretaries. We don't have secretaries anymore. And I was told in 1985 that I really did not need a personal computer on my desk because we had somebody to type your papers for you. And in less than 5 years, nobody was typing papers for anyone anymore. We were all doing we're using then called word processors. So we have many fewer secretaries. In fact, we have almost none. We now have executive assistants, but they have higher level cognitive skills. Communication skills become a premium, for example.
Mark, as an educator, is it appropriate to think that higher education is teaching people how to learn so that they can adapt in the future, as opposed to stuffing some amount of knowledge into their heads?
Yeah, and that's the change, man. Those of us with gray hair remember when you memorized, and students today will tell you, I can Google that, or I can find it on YouTube, see how to do it. It's not about memorizing a set of facts, but it's having enough of a knowledge base to know where to go get information, where to teach yourself, how to continue learning, and know whether that learning you need is short-term or long-term, such as more education as opposed to a little research project.
And even skills are static.
Yeah.
In the sense that they're likely to be obsoleted in the future at some stage.
Well, and some of these are sort of non-obvious, like keywords. In this world, being able to think of what are the right keywords to go find information is not an immediately obvious thing. Now, we sort of teach that implicitly in higher education. We don't have a course on keywords, But as you go through your educational experience, you become more and more adept at understanding which keywords are going to get you the information you're looking for. Because you can waste a lot of time in Google and YouTube as well as be extremely productive depending on your facility with search terms, keywords.
This
Nancy,
issue-
I talk to a lot of small business owners, and I get the sense that they fall into two types. They're either in a constant state of crisis or they're in denial. And given that, this just seems like such a difficult issue for them to address, to prepare for. What do you see?
Well, many of our customers, hundreds of thousands, are in the millions globally, are small businesses. And so, preparation is sometimes challenging. And somebody mentioned the recruitment efforts. It always seems like we're all, regardless of business size, looking for those qualified workers. And I believe that is sometimes a challenge for small businesses. But I wanted to mention something that I think we sometimes may not even think about when we use the term AI and where it can help small businesses. And that's in this notion of augmented intelligence. Augmented intelligence being data analytics. Mark mentioned training students today to use data at their fingertips to make smart decisions. Small businesses, medium businesses, large corporations all have access to data these days that's very rich about their business. And so when we talk about teaching small businesses how to think progressively, think about the data that's at your fingertips and doing things like what we refer to in human capital management as people science. Thinking about your workforce, thinking about recruitment, thinking about patterns of where you found talent in the marketplace and mining that data. And that's accessible to all. And so that's an example of where we think of this very narrow, machine-oriented job displacement definition of AI, where the reality is data and analytics is another, augmented intelligence is another definition that can really help small and medium businesses.
Do you see that? Do they appreciate that opportunity?
There's a learning curve there, I think, to understand that this data is readily accessible and how to take advantage of it. And so, even when you think about things like your human capital management type of system, and with the SaaS environment, people running software on subscription these days, the price of software as a subscription is so affordable, easily accessible online. All of your data is stored there. And so you can go and mine that data and you can mine your customer data. Where am I having success? Where I'm marketing to? Where am I hitting the right demographic? What is the right demographic? How do I use search terms on Google and other search engines to target more of those suspect and likely suspect customers? So it is a learning curve, but it's something that's very accessible to all.
Harry, you focus on the automotive segment a lot, and one area that people are always talking about is, it's going to hit with drivers.
Yep.
We're not going to need truck drivers. We're not going to need cab drivers. Is that the right place to focus? Is that where it's going to hit first? And do you have a sense of what these people are going to do?
Yeah, I don't know that it'll be first, but it certainly creates huge challenges because it is a large sector of the economy. There are 3 million Americans who drive a truck for a living, about 500,000 folks who drive a cab, another 500,000 who drive an Uber, and then there are hundreds of thousands who drive a delivery truck for UPS or FedEx or others. So you're talking about one of the largest kind of job categories. And clearly the technology from automated driving is right around the corner. General Motors has said publicly that they will have automated taxis picking up people in 2019, next year. GM, Mercedes are on the front end of that curve. The worst performers are a few years behind them. But in the early 2020s, the technology will clearly be there. It's just a question of how the regulatory framework will work around that. And so it's a huge issue. I don't know if it'll be the first area, but you have that tension. And it's even harder than that because right now, for example, we have a shortage of truck drivers. As truck drivers who came into the industry 40 years ago or getting ready to retire, it's obviously a very hard, difficult job. And so truck companies have a hard time recruiting drivers. And when those folks are worried that their job might not be there in 5 years, try getting someone to go through 12 months of training. So we have this really kind of this bubble effect where you have folks who, because of the acceleration of automation, is still on the lower end outside of some core areas. We have this kind of false high of extremely low unemployment in the next 2 or 3 years that I think will be offset over time.
There have been examples so far, especially in warehouse type environments where people have, like Amazon, have adopted more robotic technology, but increased employment at the same time. Can that continue?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, is that, so 4 years ago, Amazon had 0 robots, 0. They probably had, and this, I'm not sure about this number, about 350,000 employees, human employees. Today they have about 520,000 human employees, about 100,000 robots. And that number is accelerating. A year and a half ago, that number was 45,000. And so what you're seeing is the distribution center jobs, those are being automated because it's frankly much more efficient to be done by a robot. But all the work around that, logistics design, supporting your customer, marketing strategy, all those things that are higher end skills that play to a professional job set need more talent. And so all those are all the kind of, as Nancy talked about with augmented intelligence, there are a whole host of things that are 1 or 2 layers of the onion away from where we are today that aren't necessarily foreseeable, but that will create opportunities if you have the flexibility and the skill set to take advantage of them.
We're just about out of time. Does anybody have one more hopeful thought to leave us with?
Well, we need to worry about the people that don't have the skill sets and the knowledge and that get left behind in this universe. That's a big public policy challenge that we can't solve in 15
That's not the
seconds.
hopeful thought I was looking for.
Can I give you one?
But that's a call to action. It's going to be a challenge we're going to face as a nation, and it's not far off.
I'll give you a program, Apprenticeship Carolina. It's one of the best programs I've seen. It's purely private sector run and managed. It started about a decade ago by Cooper Standard, I think was the original employer. And they now involve 700 companies in South Carolina. They've had 11,000 apprentices. They expect to double that number in the next 2 years. And it's all a partnership of junior colleges and employers who weren't getting the multidisciplinary skill set they needed out of local schools. And so they created a bunch of highly specialized majors. So that's not going to solve the problem 15 years from now, but it's going to solve the problem 3 to 5 years from now. And I think if we see more and more of those efforts nationally on a regional basis, it'll make a huge difference.
Lauren, I'll give you a hopeful point. Work will be safer in the future,
If you have it.
if you have it.
You have it.
Hey.
Safer if you don't have it, too.
Dennis Lockhart, Harry Wilson, Nancy Harris, Mark Becker, thank you all.
Thank you, Lauren.